For a while, I tried it. I did it regular. Had my quiet place set up. I had my.
Can you hear me? Okay.
You're not very loud.
Well, obviously you can hear me though.
I think about it.
Yeah.
But you are all the way.
I've been told.
But doesn't it make your mind more peaceful and relaxed?
Yeah, but that's just thinking about stuff.
Well,
That's not meditating.
But it still can be a time to slow down.
Well, no, I've never had a problem relaxing.
Okay, that's good.
That might be the reason. You're already relaxed.
Well, I'm a fairly relaxed person. I always have been. You know. I don't,
Is that all it's supposed to do?
No, that's the thing. Is it's supposed to do a lot of other stuff, and you know, I was willing to try it to see the benefits, but it's the same thing that I got from coaches about sports. No, don't think about it. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. I can't not think about it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The whole concept of not thinking about it is totally foreign to me. If I'm doing something, then I think about it. If it's a real habitual, mindless sort of thing, I suppose I could not think about it, but I don't do that much of that kind of stuff. So.
Okay, you're live. Everybody can hear you.
Meditating on something.
Okay.
You can hear everybody?
Subject to meditate on.
Who's there?
They give you
a
mantra. That's what mantras are.
Yeah.
Om Mani Padme Hum.
I have a lot of.
Om Mani Padme Hum. I tried that one.
It worked. I'm not surprised it didn't do much for you.
Well,
Well,
it works for lots of
You're
people.
full screen.
I mean, with the Baha'is, they just meditate on their writings. They don't try to empty their minds. So there's different ways.
Well, it's a different form of meditation.
Yeah.
I was trying
Say something?
There's a lot
classical
of background noise.
Tibetan Buddhist
everybody can hear you.
meditation, which is.
Hey!
Do they have?
Hey, everybody!
Do they have Jamie Dodgers in Australia?
No, that works better than just having her at the back of the room and nobody can see it.
Yeah, now she's like kind of sitting at the table.
There's a lot of background noise. I can't hear you very well.
Sorry.
Tough luck, I think that means.
Yeah, it could be the projector.
It's probably Steve eating.
So Tiffany is a co-organizer. She's joining us from Australia.
Oh, okay.
So she's on tonight. So we'll get started.
How are you?
I'm good.
So Tiffany, when you get a chance, will you just check the live stream, make sure it's working? I don't know if she heard that.
No, I don't think so.
I'm just getting interference, Chris.
Okay, can you just check the live stream when you have a chance?
Nope, she didn't hear that.
I'll just text it to her.
Well, she looked
Where's
at
the microphone pickup?
On the computer itself. Yeah. It's okay. It's assumed to be working, so it's okay. Anyway, so nothing, that's just the audio of the room here getting picked up. This isn't an actual like camera filming anybody. So this actually gets displayed online to our live stream, so people can see what we're talking about. They can hear us and see the slides here, but they don't see us. So like, you have no fear of like, if you're part of the witness protection program or something.
Don't worry, there's cameras somewhere.
Yeah. There's enough cell phones in the room to probably someone's.
They already know who's here, so don't worry about it.
All right. And there's 2 people on the live stream right now. That's
but I got these
So,
voice some this time.
cool. So it's live. So everything's all systems are go. I can't really diagnose the interference that Tiffany's getting right now, but it's assumed that it's probably the projector. That's a new technology. This is having this up here. So sorry about the brightness. My slides are usually dark, and when we get to the dark slides, we'll see if that improves things. So we also have the speaking cue timer, and then some people have badges that I handed out today, and there's different icons on those for different levels of different things people have done to participate in and about the organization. So the name and the thing above it in the header is just standard, and then the bottom is like when certain things happen, you get flair.
I have a gold star.
Yes, you do. That's participation in at least 25 of our meetups.
What?
Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. And so I had a badge as well for myself. and my son stole it. So yeah, that's how
His
that-
name's Chris too?
It is today. Yeah. So the way this is going to go is that we're going to do. I'm just going to do my kind of opening bit, 10 maybe 15 minutes max, and then we'll open it up to roundtable. We'll stay in roundtable, and I have this cue timer that been working on getting it better and better every time. That basically everyone's name goes in the queue timer, and then when someone's talking, their time accumulates, and then someone raises their hand to talk, and if they have less talk time than anybody else, they speak next, basically. So if everybody in this, if you go around the room, if Mike has 1 minute and Steve has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., and everyone raises their hand to talk, Michael would go next automatically, even if he was the last to raise his hand, because he has the lowest talk time. That's basically how it works. You'll see it. I'll load it on this full screen when we're actually live doing that piece. Yeah, cool. So let's get started. I don't know why that went over there, but cool. So we're talking about this time about I labeled it as people are awesome, and there's this thing that happens in our brains about how we have this orientation toward to remember the things that happen to us that are extreme, physically violent or otherwise negative, right? It's a protection mechanism, right? So if every time something bad happens to you, if that's right and you're always kind of omnipresent in your mind, you're likely to have a defense ready for it if it were to occur again. So it's a natural defensive mechanism. The problem is in a modern civilized society, that kind of natural mechanic happening in our brains gives us this slight orientation in our mental faculties to have this orientation or this bias towards the negativity. So let's just as a show of hands, who can instantly recall something violent or negative that happened to them in their life? Instantly recall, like without having to think much
Sorry,
about it.
Chris, I can't hear you very well. There's a lot of interference. Or a lot of echo.
All right.
Do you have a pad, something that's doesn't transmit sound?
How about now? Can you hear me better?
So you sound like a spook, but I can hear you better.
She's hearing reflected sound because it's bouncing off the walls and going back to her.
Yeah, so less hanging curtains up around the whole room. I'm not sure what I could do at the moment.
Okay, all right, so that's a little bit better. Where I'm positioned now is a little bit better than it was. Thank you.
Yep. We can always move you around the room if keep trying different places. So now if you have something on your chin, you can wipe it now too. All right, so any change, Tiffany?
It's a little better, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Ben.
All right. Ben just put some napkins underneath the computer maybe to buffer it from vibrating off the table or something. Who knows?
Okay, that is working a lot better. Thanks, Ben. You're a legend.
Okay, so interestingly how in our minds we have this ability, we have this defense trigger, right? That gives us this idea to where we can really quickly recall these negative experiences. And if we have a lifetime of these negative experiences, we can find a bit of a bias creeping up into our thoughts. And I want to try to present a case kind of against that and some maybe some tools here. And but we always start off this with a joke. And so the joke for the day is this. Here's the question. As an outside observer, what do you think of the human race? Yeah, so think of your answer. All right, that was the joke. So if you were...
It's not a two-part joke.
Yeah, it's not a two-part joke. It's just if you're actually thinking about the answer to that question, it's just a joke on you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is a quote from someone in my past that I ran into that I have always remembered. And I've used this quote because I found it hilarious, especially when an example of it happens. And it's no good deed goes unpunished, right? And this was a staff sergeant that I had. That was actually my boss when I was in the military.
Looks like a command sergeant major.
No, this is just a random picture.
Ah!
Yeah, I didn't want to put his picture and post it on the internet. So, but that's his name. That's his real name. And anyway, he had said that after a couple things had happened. So someone tried to do the right thing and fell on their face. So they're just doing they're told, they try to go above and beyond or do something, trying to really hard to do something good and end up failing miserably. And then that was always his comeback line. No good deed goes unpunished. And so as funny as that is, I think there's some merit in underlying that. And sometimes there's collateral consequence to when we try to do good things for other people. Have you ever done that in your life experience? Right? You try to do something really good for somebody, and you end up making something worse, or otherwise, you get punished somehow. Like, for example, I have a really good example, is that years back, my cousin and his family was kind of down on their luck, and so I had said, well, come with us for a little while, I'll take you in. It wasn't a good idea. It turned out to be a good deed that was punished severely.
I still can't hear.
Don't worry, you didn't need to hear that anyway.
I still can't hear you very well, I'm sorry.
Maybe you can just get it on the live stream. Shut your audio.
Sorry?
Try live stream.
Try using the live stream. Maybe you can hear me there.
Oh, I could do that, but then I can't participate.
Just turn your mic back on when you want to participate.
Turn the computer around so the microphone's going straight to you, Chris, if you don't mind, please.
How's that?
Okay, let's see if that works. We'll try it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. So, anyway, so this is the introduction here. So we always get back to the joke, and then we do a quote, and I try to have the jokes be reasonably funny. I thought that one was good. And then sometimes they're funniest because they fail. That's been kind of like the secondary running joke, just to get you up to speed on that art. And the quotes.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a milestone, 100%. Yeah. And so then this is like the main part of the presentation. So in this whole idea that people are awesome is the first thing that I put up here above everything is I call it the human spirit. Now the human spirit isn't necessarily a tangible thing. It's a placeholder, right? It's just placeholder language, as I put it in quotes. It's not defined. It's a metaphysical thing, right? But we can find what most people would identify in the human spirit popping up everywhere in everyday life. Especially the more extreme the circumstances, the more you can see the perseverance of the human spirit. My belief system is that we have a strong orientation towards the goodness in life. And good, I know, is another subjective term, but I'm going to try to make a decent case for that. And we have an unprecedented capacity for empathy. We can empathize with. I watched a movie the other day called Chappie. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it's this robot that becomes sentient. That's now a pretty typical sci-fi story. And you find yourself for this thing that's just a robot that takes reasonable human form. It doesn't even have true human form. It looks like a robot the whole time. They don't put it in a human skin or anything like that. And you find yourself having empathy throughout the movie for what you know is just a robot, or for a robot, right?
The same with the movie AI.
Well, AI, it looks even more like kind of human, And we can even draw empathy. Human beings can even draw empathy towards objects, Like, for example, take some kid's Xbox and smash it with a sledgehammer into a million pieces and watch their reaction.
They'll cry.
They'll scream and cry. It's a valued possession, but also it's like you're hurting something that's it's painful.
It's an extension of their self.
It's an extension, that's right. And we have this ability, unprecedented ability, to have that extension into the non-physical world, which is amazing. The human spirit, we can talk hours and hours about what we put under that blanket category. Now, I'm an atheist. I don't really have a belief. I'm not using this in a metaphysical term, saying that there is a spirit. I'm saying it's the collective. What do we want to say? Your consciousness or mantra of human beings in general. I think is a tangible thing. I think that's measurable and a tangible thing.
Connectedness.
That's right. And for each person, that term probably has variance in meaning, I would assume. But for me, I look at it as like the collective consciousness, or the collective kind of livingness of all of humanity. That's what I think of as the human spirit. So then we look at the human condition. There's some things that you can very much say is a disadvantage, but I'm looking at all this stuff from the standpoint of an advantageous position. So our mental states, we're temporal on this planet, right? We have a fleeting time on this world, all right? So we're temporal creatures. We live within a bookends of birth to death. That's in in which our life is defined. And some believe that there's something beyond death. Some believe there's not, but the fact remains that we are temporal in this life. And that temporal nature leads us to a lot of decisions that we probably wouldn't make otherwise. So being temporal is a lot different than if you were omnipotent or live forever. If you're immortal, I guarantee you, your what you found important would probably change versus not being omnipotent. Somebody just walk in?
Nope. Ben! Here you are.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, hi. Sorry to interrupt, but I didn't see this Lego thing on here. We'll talk later.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, so
Have some food.
the human condition, human beings being temporal, sometimes is a juxtaposition with our values and also of what our goals are in life. And so that temporal nature a lot of times has a tendency to expedite the goodness that they do. And there's many examples of that. Next is this and I forgot to mention the fact that the afterlife, whether or not the afterlife exists or doesn't exist, the fact that nobody knows for sure also adds value to the temporal. See what I mean? It raises the stakes on the temporal portion of our lives.
Well, maybe you don't know.
Well, how so?
If you believe there is no afterlife, this is your shot to do something good.
So wouldn't that be very important?
I would say it'd be very important. My belief is that it's very important. Other people could do the opposite. In projecting everything future into the afterlife, they might not put as much emphasis on this life.
Or they might put more.
Or they might put more, that's right. So that plays into this dynamic. That's why I listed it in here. Right? So this concept of neuroplasticity we talked about, our abilities to adapt our minds and to become basically all brand new people over the course of time. It usually doesn't happen overnight. It usually does take some time. It's a slow moving thing. That's why it's neuroplasticity. It moves like plastic in a slow kind of way. But if we change our environment and we change the information by which we expose ourselves, over time we can completely reinvent and change our entire minds. Our brains actually physiologically will change over time.
I think the neuroplasticity is instantaneous. It's how we form memories.
Well, that would be in a micro scale. Like, so all your memories don't change in a second, right?
Well, not all of them, no, but
Right.
But the most recent event is written in the brain.
Right, and then enough new events come in, and then it's like a chalkboard. To fit more stuff on the chalkboard, you have to erase something, and then just like a classic chalkboard, you can still see what was written underneath. If you take the eraser and erase it, and you write something new over it, you can still see sometimes like what was written on the board before you. Then you erase it again, and you write something else, and you get this like cascading effect, and maybe you can see 3 or 4 things in the past. But eventually, what was written on that board at one point becomes a distant thing. Now, we don't have conscious understanding of all the things we don't remember. We don't have a wrapper around what's not there, right? So like, there's no way to recall what you don't remember. Now, you can have a sense that there's something that you used to know that you no longer know, but you can't actually then say, oh well, it's in there somewhere. Memories fade. Especially in non-distinct things. Some memories are more persistent than others, but the fact is that as we encounter new experiences in our life, our minds can actually reshape themselves over the course of our lifetime. Many times they can. And so this is a very hopeful thing. So no matter what state we find ourselves in, we can always look forward to a different future. Yeah, we're not doing the discussion portion, but please, if you want to interject something quick, please.
I was wondering if you had any thoughts about how this notion that the mind is constantly changing informs the decision to incarcerate somebody at 18, quote, for life.
It should, shouldn't it? Yeah. I think that if we were good stewards, that's a really great question. I think if we were good stewards of that process in others, something like that would not be possible. Like, because knowing that's how the brain works, we should then work towards shaping that brain positively for the future, not putting them into a system that almost certainly would cause that brain not to shape positively. Taking from our self perspective, though, we can, with knowledge of this, we can start to filter what information comes to us, what type of situations come to us, knowing that that's going to reshape our brains over time. And so this can be a really positive force in our lives. We can basically consciously reshape our brains with intent. based on what we do and how we behave and how we act and who we affiliate with over a long period of time. So birds of a feather flock together is some colloquial terms that are kind of used to describe this phenomenon in our minds, right? Birds of a feather flock together is a classic one. You become more definitely like the people you hang out with, right? So your social network, who you experience and who you spend a lot of time with becomes very relevant to how your brain shapes itself over time. Family, we can't really change, we can't really do much about that, but we kind of get what we get with that. But then how we interact with them can definitely be shaped over time. So there is some consequences with that, with broader society. You know, I cannot overnight myself change all of which is society, but I can exhibit some measurements of change within my micro areas of influence, right? Like I don't think I'm going to be elected dictator of the world tomorrow. So, you know, probably good for everybody else. But you know, so since no one gets that superpower, you have to work within the influences of change that you have available to you. Yeah. So that's the neuroplasticity. This bias against negativity is kind of the selling point of this whole entire philosophy that I'm trying to present to you tonight. Is that we have to understand that there is this natural bias towards those negative events in our lives. If somebody comes up and punches you in the face, like randomly, I guarantee you will have a strong memory of that event, unless they knock you cold. But you know, you'll have a strong memory of getting mugged, let's say, for probably quite some time to come. Very few people get mugged, and the next day it was like nothing ever happened, right? These extreme things that happen in our lives tend to naturally stand out in our minds as very prominent things, right? And so, if we then look through that lens on how we look at everything in the world, we're doing ourselves a huge disservice going forward. Because then what we're allowing is we're allowed or alter what we experientially encounter or bring into our minds every day. So we have to understand that that bias exists and reverse that trend. Reverse that bias if we can cognitively in our minds and say, hey, I'm gonna look past that and say, yes, there's this X, Y, and Z going on in the world and I don't like it. But there's also A through T happening in the world that are fantastic. And so I'm gonna make my conscious decision to orient myself more towards that body of information than the smaller subset of information which is negative, right? For my own mental health and for my own well-being, and to keep it real, to keep my brain in perspective of the reality, because we do have this inclination to have this bias towards these negative things. I mean, just take somebody that watches the news all the time. Someone that watches 2, 3, 4 hours of news a day will be probably one of the most negative people you've ever met. Probably know somebody like that.
So were you meaning bias toward negativity?
Yeah. So
Okay.
Since you have an inclination towards goodness, Wendy, my belief is that since you have a goodness since all human beings have an orientation towards goodness, things that are not good, things that are evil events or you know, very negative events will stand out in our minds more prominently because they're so unusual.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't remember the car ride home every day, but the day that you get in the accident. You see what I'm saying? You'll have a bias towards remembering that experience. You see what I'm saying? 10, 15, 20 years after the accident, you probably will still remember getting in that car accident.
Yeah.
But the everyday experience of driving down the road and you know, without consequence, it just escapes our mind. Our minds have a selective bias towards those extreme negative events. Just naturally, it's a natural defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think the extreme positive are pretty strong too. But you're saying that still the negative seems to have stronger.
Sure, because from an evolutionary standpoint, or from a standpoint like what's going to keep you alive more, right? Yeah. Is that conscious fear of the potential thing that could harm you, okay, or the having a cognition, or you know, in the front of your mind, that pleasant experience. You see what I mean? So having a natural selective bias towards negative events would actually have a higher chance of survivability, in theory. So you have like this preconditioned programming to have this bias towards this negativity. But what I'm saying is, but then armed with that information, we can then start to model our own thinking. Start to say, wait a minute, I'm going to look past that bias and I'm going to focus on this other stuff. So I'm just saying, use the information to enhance the information that you select. Yeah. Selection of information is an extremely important modern 2017 human activity. And if we select information constantly that's negative, we'll be in, I'll get you in the queue. Right, so I have like only 2 more slides anyway. So the physical side, right? So this is intriguing to me because the physical side of like what makes people awesome, I think, is first of all is we have this, I'll skip around here. But I put this picture in. We have this extreme ability to condition a certain part of our physical bodies, right? You don't see any other animal doing this. You don't see cheetahs out there, doing sprints to try to become faster sprinters. Human beings have this very selective, conscious, active attempt to increase a certain attribute of their physical self. This happens, we probably all do this to some extent. That's first of all something that we do that's quite different. That's kind of in the adaptation phase. You can actually see people too constantly putting themselves in unpleasant or uncomfortable environments to tune their bodies into being able to do extremes like extreme ocean diving. Or there's this one guy who can take like extremely cold temperature water for like minutes at a time. Cut a hole in the ice and then like 100 meters down, cut another hole and the guy can swim. Seriously, there's this one dude that's trained himself to do this superhuman, thing. And you can find all kinds of, go to Guinness, Book of Records, you'll find all kinds of fun stuff. But there's this thing too about when we're first born, is we have this extreme dependency on our parents and our extreme dependency on our immediate community, our family, for years, unlike any other animal. Some animals are born and as soon as they're born, they can run with the herd, Human beings are the most vulnerable species. When we're born, we're just vulnerable for years. We have full dependency on the others. And, we have, I guess, a selective memory to some extent because we forget that in our lives as we become adults. But adults are no less interdependent of the massive society as the infant is, just with much more complexity, in my opinion. Because I don't grow my own food. I don't make my own gas that goes in my car, et cetera, et cetera. So this interdependency that we have as human beings is awesome. It's unprecedented. Yeah. That's enough for that. One more thing. Let me get through this. Metrics, right? Our modern physical developments across this world of our infrastructure, of our cities, of our collective infrastructure is absolutely unprecedented. No animal species has altered the environment or changed the face of this earth. In fact, you've heard me say this before, human beings now do more alteration to the lithosphere every year than nature does itself. That's crazy. That's been happening since like 95. Somewhere along there is where man started doing more changes every year to the earth than nature itself. That's crazy. Right? So the pyramids are pretty amazing, built in antiquity, but comparatively to what we have today, the pyramids kind of really aren't that impressive comparatively to the engineering feats of modern times. There's a lot of these people that are, I'm sure you've heard it online and stuff, people saying, oh, we can't even do that today. That's bullcrap. We just wouldn't do that today. Yeah. We wouldn't stack a bunch of limestone for some, we wouldn't do it today. It's not that we couldn't do it today. We just don't. We won't. But then you look at some of these modern engineering projects where multiple mountains are re-sculpted or shaped or moved, or some of these underground things that have been done, like the metro system in DC. I mean, some of these engineering feats of today make what happened in the pyramids look like child's play. Yeah. Anyway, Modern Marvels is a show to fact check me on that one. Infant mortality rates going down. They have been going down for quite some time now. There's this conscious effort of massive disease eradication that's been happening for quite some time now, and we're actually getting on top of a lot of these diseases, some of which are completely being removed from the face of the earth. I think polio is on its way out. Smallpox is on its way out. A whole bunch of others. We're working on getting them gone, eradicated from.
Smallpox is out. It's a laboratory organism.
So we're doing this.
And military.
Yeah, and so we're with globalization. We do have this like slow process where we are seeing a slow progression towards poverty reduction throughout the whole world. So things are happening, and things have been happening positively, and they've been marching in the right direction for quite some time. And I have this slide to kind of show, this is a per capita slide, showing the reduction of diseases and other human ailments. Conscious effort to reduce these, but almost collectively across all humanity, and it's working. And as you see, this is a progression. It's a consistent progression. It's not an up and down graph. It's a consistent cumulative progression towards disease eradication. So we're doing a damn good job. Now, the last thing to kind of summarize what I'm saying is like, it's really easy. It's a seek and ye shall find world. There's no doubt about that, to use a common colloquialism. It's a seek and ye shall find world. If we want to find negativity, we can find it in almost anything, right? If we want to find positivity, we can find that in almost anything. And we need to be conscious that, or at least know, that we have the power, we have the free will, if you will, to decide which array of information we want to let into our minds, into our imagination. Because it does affect our health, our wellness, and it affects our reality. Yep. And that's it. So now we'll get into the discussion. Cool. So, any questions? Ben?
Are you advocating belief in anything other than the correct statistics of reality? Then that we should believe that good things happen more often than they do, or bad things happen less often than they do?
No, I'm not. I'm advocating that we have a mental state that puts us in touch with the one that's most consistent with reality. But I'm arguing that our natural state will give us a bias towards believing more negative things are happening than really are. Okay. But yes, I would definitely advocate for the most realistic picture of reality. I think that's the healthiest, right?
Yeah.
So you guys can't see what I'm doing, but I'm adding all today's participants to the list here. And we'll start our open discussion. Any other questions?
Well, there could be a Pollyanna, someone that is inordinately positive.
Definitely. If you were to try to have had to consciously pick which way you'd rather be biased, what do you think would be better for you, to be biased towards the positive or towards the negative? I would argue that being biased towards the positive will give you a better outlook on life.
Yeah, it'll bring you more happiness.
I think, Chris, that we, rather than positive or negative, we bias towards pleasure or pain. And so we always look at avoiding the pain and seeking the pleasure.
Okay. So wasn't there a classic philosopher that said everybody just does everything in their own best interest? What was that philosopher? Anybody know? This isn't a school class, but there's
Ayn Rand, if you want to give her
Ayn Rand, no.
the dignity of calling her a philosopher.
That's a stretch.
I was going to say there are several.
There's a specific philosopher that was oriented toward, had its core philosophy was like everyone just does everything in their own best interest. Yeah, I can do that.
But that's really a meaningless statement because you can always say that the reason that you're maybe being altruistic and doing good for other people is because it gives you joy in doing that. And so then the person can say, yeah, see, it's selfish. You're doing it, because it makes you feel good.
Right.
So you can always say that, so it's a meaningless statement.
Well, that's maybe okay. There's nothing wrong with making somebody else happy and making you happy too, really.
And a sadistic person...
I wasn't saying anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
A sadistic person would draw pleasure from harming others.
So the harming of others in their case would be in their own best interest. In theory, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone see this okay?
Yeah.
So this is the cue timer thing that we talked about. What's your name again, sir? Sorry, I can't see your
Art.
name. Art, that's right. Let me add you in. So this should be better than ever.
It is better than ever.
Would be good to have a horizontal flip option for later.
Yeah, and you know, no offense, Art, you got automatically put off screen now. Sorry about that.
I don't feel too bad.
Cool. Yeah, so everyone should be able to see this now. Yeah. All right, so when someone raises their hand, they go into the queue. Ben just raised his hand, so see he's in the queue. And then based on talk time, everyone's talk time, if you're the lowest, you get precedence in the queue, is the way this works. Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
So I was listening to a book by famous skinny Bill Nye, the science guy, and he was talking about this particular question, which I think is really at the heart of a lot of philosophy, and that is, why do people help other people? What causes philanthropy, or is philanthropy even a thing?
Mm-hmm.
He had collected some evidence that philanthropy exists across species. Some species are capable of philanthropic activity. And he left with the assumption that the data will support an argument that genetic selection will favor gene pools that help each other out.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the way that this is encouraged is to ensure that people have a nagging need to be philanthropic. And that, as Bill was suggesting, it's not unique to feel good after helping people. It is inculcated into our genes.
I would agree with that.
So you can still assert that it's in our own self-interest to be philanthropic if by self-interest you mean the self-interest of our genes over, epochs. But an organism, at the level of a single organism, right, a single individual, it may or may not be in their best interest to be philanthropic, but it is embedded in them nonetheless to participate in philanthropy, or to feel good about doing so, and to feel perhaps not so good about failing to do so, because it is necessary for the survival of the society, and the survival of the society is necessary to the survival of the gene. So we can say a selfish gene is a philanthropic gene.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree that arguing that everything is reducible to immediate self-interest, or the self-interest of the organism specifically, is simplistic.
So before Ben goes, I should be able to so another way this works is if someone interrupts. So let's say that Ben was just talking, right? And I interrupted him. So, and I go like this. My time actually goes up, but it goes up twice every second. So it goes 2 seconds for every 1 second, because interrupting somebody is allowed, but discouraged through that mechanic. Yeah, just kind of showing how that works. So let's see, Steve, you wanted to talk? So raise your hand, and then Ben was actually next. I added 6 seconds to him by mistake. So go ahead, Ben.
There is, people do want to feel like they are helping others, but this often doesn't work out because a lot of people will donate $1 to 100 different charities and feel like they've done more than if they donate $10,000 to a single charity. So they're like donating 100 times less, but getting the same feeling.
You think that's true?
I think it is.
Steve?
Because people would say, hey, I donated to 100 different charities, man. What did you do? You only donated to one.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Steve?
There is also a selection bias for social cooperation. That's part of how we evolved. Those that contribute to a tribe, for instance, will more likely survive. Their genes will be passed along better. So it's not just an individual. You have to think of the collective as well.
So Wendy.
Okay. But I guess I think we already had said that there are individuals that possibly are not really into giving, maybe some kind of sociopath or just somebody that's really burned out, like you talked about being burned out by you're good and it all explodes in your face. It isn't received as well as it should be. You get burnt by that enough times in life, different ways. You may be really not trying to make anybody feel better. You may be trying to screw them up and just get to laugh at it or something.
Troll somebody.
Yeah. But you know that's still a small number of people, hopefully. But we all have that, and it's a little bit probably. We've all been burned some. Yeah.
So it's Thorndike's law of effect states that behavior associated with pleasantlessness will be learned, and those associated with pain will be extinguished. There's a lot of philosophy under behaviorism that describes what we've been talking about. This phenomenon that perhaps genetically, we have socially and as individuals this inclination towards participating in larger society, being more follower oriented, and also being not create waves. Might be kind of built into us. This kind of cooperative species that act cooperatively, like has been said, have a evolutionary advantage over those that don't work, that work as individuals. And so over time, as Bill Nye says, those would have a positive orientation to be selected and therefore be the dominance that you see around the world. Now, to what extent, though, does cooperation become counterproductive? So, like, if everybody was complicit or cooperative, is a certain amount of counterbalancing rebellious force necessary to then drive the collective further. Like, take that to, what I'm saying is, how can we take that thinking to the next level? If everybody was complicit and agreed, you'd have very little chance of change, right? So is there, you've seen in history plenty of times where the rebel ends up being the one who, the rebellious force ends up being the ones that take over, and then they install their ideology because now they have the power. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes the minority is the correct force, or has the correct position, and so they have to become a rebellion or opposition force against, and not be complicit at all, and resist, and then in order to overcome. So I think absolute complicity wouldn't be an appropriate mechanic. I think you'd have to have complicity or whatever we call it in the majority, but then have a minority have a rebellious nature in the minority, right? To stir the pot. I think stirring the pot is a necessary mechanic to some extent in there. Is my intuition on that. Michael?
I don't remember raising my hand.
Oh, cool. So
you did raise your hand. So put it down.
I thought you had. So this is another feature. If no one's talking, right? I'm not counting it towards my time because I'm explaining it. Yeah. And so normally I would count like my initial kind of introduction to the topic. I would count that as my time. I stopped doing that. That's not fair to me.
It's not fair to you.
Yeah. So cool. So does anyone then have a counterpoint to offer? Michael?
Yeah. On the subject of the behaviorist nature of reinforcement, people tend to think of the behavioral responses as reward and punishment. But reward and punishment are both reinforcers. They reinforce the behavior. The only thing that truly extinguishes a behavior is the absence of any reinforcement. Because behavior is all communication. And nobody communicates in order to not be heard, in order to have no response whatsoever. The things that we do that don't change anything in our interactions with other people, we do less often because it didn't make any difference. So if you do things and it pisses off 75% of the people you meet and they're mean to you, that might very well encourage you to do it more because it's a big, strong response. So you're not being ignored anymore.
Negative attention is better than no attention.
There's no such thing as negative attention, as it turns out.
You sound like a Kardashian.
Well, as it turns out, behaviorally, attention is attention. And punishment doesn't work for that very same reason. As a way to stop a behavior or to modify somebody's behavior, punishment doesn't work. It's not a good system. Because you're engaging immediately every time somebody does something. So, hey, got your string, don't I?
What about punishment with a whip, like they did to the slaves? That seems to control them pretty good.
No, actually, it tends to cause different changes than you might expect, and it tends to foment total rebellion at some point. So yeah, you can whip a horse to make him go faster than he's going right now, but over the long term, the guy who taught his horse to enjoy running is going to have a horse that runs faster. So it's not that individual cases can't work in either direction. But on the whole, if you pay attention to people when they're doing the things you want, they'll do the things you want more of the time. Reward gives you an added benefit to your reinforcement. Punishment doesn't really take away. Punishment's a really self-defeating method of changing other people's behavior.
Tiffany?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well, Chris.
You're next to speak.
I'm sorry?
I can't believe she can't hear me.
Go ahead and talk!
Oh! I can't hear you, I'm sorry, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's why I'm saying, can I be moved, please? Maybe Ben, I think it's the projector on the ceiling, Ben.
Yeah, put her down at the other end.
All right, go ahead.
I have a suggestion. Turn off the projector.
Well, I need the...
Well, actually, you need it, but we don't.
well, I want everyone to see it so that they know I'm
No,
being fair.
you need the talk timer.
We'll trust it.
I think there's going to be a certain level of trust, yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think most people in this room would trust me.
I would still like to see the numbers.
So make him sit where he can see it from your end, and the rest of us will turn it on.
Maybe I'd have Ben run the queue timer for me.
We'll just have an audit at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
That is a little better, thank you.
All right, so you had your hand up to talk. What would you like to say?
Well, I was just going to say that I couldn't hear anything, so I couldn't comment.
Okay. So the counterpoint to this argument that people are good and people are oriented towards the good is the overwhelming data of all of history, right? That shows these massive state-sponsored atrocities, and you have these serial killers, and you have this, extreme things. So, without me making the argument against that argument, I'd like to put it out there to kind of the group of like, is that really an accurate representation of humanity? If we take basically the news cycle and recorded history go to a textbook right now in elementary school or middle school or high school, and you look at the documented history of human beings, is what's documented in that book as far as what's happened an accurate picture of a reality? Is it an accurate picture of human beings and what we are? If we were an alien species and we were evaluating human beings based on our written history, would that be an accurate depiction?
So
Please.
I'll offer a counterpoint. I'm not quite sure I understood your position or your thesis, but maybe if I try to counterpoint it, you can...
Oh, wrong Ben.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. That's why he wants to keep track of the numbers.
Yeah. Sorry. There's an edit feature I can change. I'll pass it down to Ben. So he can keep Tiffany alive?
I'm afraid that most humans are engaged in passive aggressive acts intended to secure small advantages to themselves or protect situational advantages in ways that are slight. They're biased towards being undetectable, but they're at the same time overwhelming. We drive our cars, we nose, we edge, there's a certain inherent competition. And I suspect that there's a massive amount of action taken by people in which they are wasting resources for the general population, if doing so gives them even a small advantage. So inefficient use of scarce resources, I think, is an example of sort of not demoralized behavior, but less optimal behavior. And it's a special kind of selfishness, right? If I take and use a resource in a way that's suboptimal for that resource, I'm discounting its use by the general population, as long as I'm securing the benefit myself. And I think the sum of all of these little actions sort of is the defining characteristic of the human species, and that we have to work pretty hard to draw lines in the sand and curtail that sort of behavior. And then we create by these systems a kind of an artificial alternative to that sort of chaos, in which we can capture some more efficient utilization. And water is a perfect example. There are many ways to waste water. There's only a few ways to use it efficiently. And so we have rules like don't water your lawn when everybody's having a drought, because somebody would be like, I don't care if somebody gets fresh water to drink, I'm going to have a green lawn. I can afford it.
But don't you see more people abiding by the don't water your lawn than people that do?
Part of my argument was that these slights will happen where they're least observable. Will happen in ways that are less observable, and so there'll be this kind of like undercurrent.
Okay, so another counter argument is that I think that's really important. Back to what Michael was saying about the people only say things to be heard, right? Well, I think a lot of people journal. A lot of people even video journal and never show those videos to anybody. They're just their own record of things. And so a lot of people keep their own account of things only for themselves to go back and look at that record. There's been times in my life where I've journaled a lot, written down lots of information, and it's still no one's ever seen all that information in writing. There's so many thoughts that I have, and you guys are probably the same. I wouldn't know, I just know myself, but I think about things all the time I wouldn't dare say in public. Is that true for the group? Yeah, maybe, yes, no. I mean, I have a huge filter. There's a huge censor between what I think and what comes out my mouth. There's a huge governing thing, and people that don't have that are not well liked. Am I wrong on that?
Some of us have more filter than others.
I mean, the thoughts that cross my mind versus what come out of my mouth are radically different. And I'm not, that doesn't mean what comes out of my mouth is a lie, but it's oriented or it's spoken in a way that I know will be acceptable through the group of people I'm talking to. So there's a constant censorship, even though we're supposedly free. Yeah, Michael?
There's whole levels of this in almost everyone's personality. There's things about yourself that you like and don't like. There's things about yourself that your close associates like and don't like. There's things about yourself that the public perception of the public at large make clear are not acceptable.
Right.
And it's why people don't come out of the closet. It's why the demographics of who did you vote for in the last election are always different than the actual outcome of the election, because more people voted for the guy that won than actually voted for the guy that won.
If you trust the government to count.
The fact is that people communicate for interaction. The blogging at home, the blogging, if you publish it, that's communication.
Sure.
The notes on your computer that nobody but you ever sees, that's actually not communication. That's just, that's diarists. And diarists have a history of being published after they die.
Okay.
But that's not communication either. Communication takes two. You have to go, it has to go, maybe nobody responds to you, but if you say it to other people, you're trying to communicate. I think it's a different thing.
Okay.
Well, a lot of people like to hear themselves talk, especially when other people are listening. But I do often agree with what Michael said, that the other motivation of people talking to other people is to get a reaction out of them.
So there's definitely a lot of that going on in society. This whole notion of, like, I mentioned as a joke the Kardashians. I said, you know, negative attention is better than no attention for a celebrity. If a celebrity falls out of the news cycle for too long, that could mean, you know, their popularity is down. And so, you know, in that more extreme human realm, even negative attention, negative publicity, or any kind of negativity directed to them at least puts their name in people's mind. I mean, I think we have a president that got elected on that phenomenon. The news couldn't stop saying his name. They still can't. I can go to ABC, CBS, I go to any news, I pull up any website right now. I guarantee you the name Trump is on that damn website 5 or 6 times somewhere. The news cannot stop themselves. They can't help themselves from just going like crazy. It's ratings, right? It's driven by the dollar. And so, you know, this use of language. Yeah, please, Art.
Well, it can be driven by ratings, if you want to say it that way. It can be driven by the dollar, but who's releasing the dollar? In other words, they're saying it because someone is rewarding them. So we like to say it's almighty greed as we put our dollar on the table. And I find this kind of ironic in the way people present this once removed. I also am thinking, when you were talking about the counterculture, I was thinking of the French Revolution. I was also thinking of our current political situation. I think part of this presidency is general disgust, and it goes with Bernie as well, with the current situation. So as it's festered, we'll say over 24 years prior to this election, we finally elected somebody who was, I like to call, a trickster, and he's scrambling everything up. And in a way it's helpful, because after he's finished, after we throw him out or his term ends, we've got a pile of sticks, you know, that have to be reassembled. And they're better mixed up this way.
So there's this kind of ideology here that there's a bit of a rebellion force, or a counter force to the prevailing kind of status quo actually can be a very positive thing over a long period of time. That's not something I usually think of. I think that's an insight, actually. You know, like a certain amount of prevailing counterpoint force, right? Applying enough pressure to the status quo will actually either reinforce the status quo or cause the status quo to start to bend or perhaps break. So there might be an actual case that can be made for a small amount of what would otherwise be perceived as negativity. You know what I mean? To be kind of a prevailing force throughout society, to actually strengthen the good. Yeah, I never really found that much. I just find that kind of interesting. So are we in agreement as a group that that people are good by nature and that we're oriented towards the good.
People
I was
are-
basically preaching to the choir here. Yeah, Bill.
Well, it's not real clear what you're advocating. It sounds like you're saying, well, it's better to look away from the bad and keep your mind on the good because that will have a better effect or something like that. I think in the first place, what the pain, suffering, disability, and early death that we experience is to a great extent caused by some negative things in ourselves that need to be brought under control and are indeed under control to a certain extent. We, of course, do wonderful things, great things. We have, I think, our species is not alone in having properties that are based upon, that have a positive effect on how individuals feel and a negative effect on how individuals feel. So like Michael was talking about reward and punishment, something we haven't talked about yet in this group is the whole issue of child rearing. And my contention would be that not genetics, but what happens in that child rearing process is enormously important as to what kind of a person's going to be. And like Michael was talking about, he was alluding to or really mentioning that punishment tends to produce oppositional behavior. But we as a species have not become convinced that we should stay away from punishment. And so we continue the process, and a lot of what we do and what we talk about and so forth is in terms of punishment of what we consider to be bad. I think that our species is terrible compared to how it could become in the future if we use our minds effectively in how we treat ourselves, how we the ethics that we develop, and the how that's manifested in our child rearing procedures and our societal procedures having to do with behavioral management and improvement. So I think the only way that we can really do something about how awful we are, and I think listening to the news, just discounting the horrible suffering that's going on and saying, oh, well, there's just a little bit of genocide, a little bit, we're getting better, we're not having so much war, and there's just a little bit of poverty and everything, not many people are dying of horrible illnesses that are produced by what we do and so on. I think that that's sort of like, this is as good as it gets, and I don't think that's necessarily inevitably so. I think that we as a species could really rise very much above the way that we are currently. Not technology and so forth, that will help us do that, but I'm talking about how is the whole child rearing process. Child rearing is one of the most complex professions that we can engage in. There's no training program for it, and I think that that is something that can indeed change. So
Could maybe make that training program? Can you ever think about making that training program?
No, I have not. That's not been something that I've well, I've been a child psychiatrist, and so I've helped individual families with the difficulties that their children were having and so forth, and that's how I got a lot of my ideas. And so I developed kind of a what I call the rational ethical model of child rearing, but that's just a one way of viewing things. But so I don't think that we will stop doing these horrible things that we hear about on the news and that we know about in our personal lives by saying, oh, well, it just happens a little bit. Mostly we're good, so we just ought to look at the good stuff and so forth. I can't identify with that.
I have really enjoyed listening to Bill talk, and I have absolutely forgotten what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Ben?
So you asked if we think people are good. Well, I don't really understand the question. If there is a very convenient way to do some good, most people will take it. But and if there are two things to choose between that do not involve themselves, like do I sacrifice these people to save those larger number of people? Then yeah, most people would, after grunting about I don't want to sacrifice anybody, they would do so. But as soon as they have to sacrifice any significant thing from themselves, they'll say, no, I'm not going to do the good. So I don't think they're, in general, good. I think that they're good for themselves and secondarily for others if there's time.
So what if I showed you example after example after example where that's not the case? Would you change your point of view?
I would take statistics on how many out of 7 billion people do that. Give me a good representation of the average instead of just picking, cherry picking all the. I'm sure some people are very unselfish, but most people are.
Right. So I would argue that all you have to do is just look around you every day, and you'd see the counterpoint to what you just said. But that's just my point of view. So, Wendy.
Okay. Well, I think it has a lot to do with maturity, because I think, like with a toddler, I think they're basically kind of selfish. I think they get taught to be more loving, so we have to mature from that, high selfishness to more altruism. Even though we say altruism has its own rewards, it's still less direct selfishness. But I was also thinking about the thing of there's this fake goodness, and it's probably good. It's a lot to politeness. So I think most people are rather polite in public and in interactions in general. But behind your back, they might be saying and doing all kinds of things not in your best interest, but to your face, they're good as gold. So that's
why would you think that?
Well, you don't see that happening ever?
I think that it does happen. I think it probably happens a lot. It's probably happened a lot to me in my life, but I don't think that happens often at all. I think that it has happened, but I think the majority of people speaking behind my back would not be terrible. Well, in general.
Well, they might not even be speaking. They might. Sorry. They might just be thinking. I mean, when you just meet someone in public, they're nice and they're polite to you, but they might, in their mind, be judging you, So that's just a different level of interaction or something.
Michael?
I think that on the subject of whether people are good or evil, I think predominantly people are about average on account of that's what they are,
By default?
Well, that's what average is. And if everybody started going out and doing what right now, today, would be considered really exemplary good behavior, and that went on, it would make it more admirable to emulate those acts. And in a generation, you would find that people were still average, although they were, on the whole, good more often. So it's not something that you can do with statistics. It's not about that. It's about choices. Everybody gets choices. Everybody has to make choices, and choosing not to choose is making a choice. So it's a matter of being responsible for your life. You are the one that decides what your actions are going to be, and we all got excuses for why we had to do what we had to do, but they're just excuses. We did what we wanted to do. Maybe it was a choice of the lesser of two evils, but, you know, we didn't spend much time looking for an alternative that wasn't another evil.
Ben.
So 3 thoughts, the same thought 3 times. I think that your question is, are most people good?
Yes.
I think that another way of stating that is the majority good? And I'm pretty confident that the majority, because they have the power to do so, will in every instance define what they have done as good.
Okay.
So there is a definitional problem. Secondly, I think that it makes sense, and the model will probably bear out under investigation, that people will use their surplus resources to do philanthropic activities. So if they have extra time, they have extra money, maybe so. But for people who have less of those things, I would expect it to be less in the way of philanthropic activity. And the second, and the third,
there is no surplus while you still have to work for a living.
And the third is investment. I think that philanthropic activity can be viewed as an investment, and that society can be viewed as a vehicle for validating those investments, or holding those investments and revolving those investments. And so we see people participate in their church, give to their church, etc. But I think that churches or other communities like that then expect to help people out when they fall on hard times, or if they get in a car accident and they need something. At very least, people are going to make some food and bring it over to the house while they can't take care of themselves, right? So, long history of things like that.
Very good. So Tiffany wanted to jump in. She can't hear well or add her voice because of the problems. So she texted me, is good or bad authentic? Question mark. We can change our perspectives, but where does authenticity come in? Was her proposal to the group.
You're still on Benji.
Oh, sorry, Art.
Oh, I want to confuse everybody and offer
The surplus?
there's surplus here, and it's only half an hour to go.
And she wants it. She's in Australia, I think.
You want some?
I love one. It's so not fair.
Because those that are left, I'll have dibs on.
Very good.
And I'll feel less guilty, so I'm being very selfish. I guess I look at it as, I disagree about as long as you have to work, and I'll refer to about half the population, women, when they're raising their children. That may not be philanthropic, I don't know, but those children are getting raised. And some of the things I see from women in particular are, I can't give it another name.
Well, I mean, that's something they wanted to do, but maybe I meant you have to work for somebody else.
Yeah, well, that's something they wanted to do, but it's still optional quite often. And I would say that there are quite a few folks that still work, and I have to say I'm a little lazier about it than most. I like to sleep in on Saturday morning some days. And so I don't do it quite the way you're talking about, Ben. I have not put myself out there when I have time available at times. So quite a bit of the time.
I'm not suggesting every single last bit of surplus. I'm suggesting that from the surplus,
that's where it comes from.
that's where it comes from. If there's less surplus, you're going to see less of it.
Yeah. So, but I have seen people carve time out, from the philanthropy. So that's what I want to say.
So I think the answer to Tiffany's question is no. I think most people are full of shit, but I think they don't know they're full of shit. Like, people subscribe to their own brand for so long that they don't recognize anymore that they're full of shit. Like they believe their own shit, and so they're not cognitively being a bullshit artist. They're not cognitively spreading the same stupid crap that they're not consciously saying, I know this isn't true, but blah, 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 blah. I think what happens to me as well. Like you say something or you think something so much that it becomes your reality or some type of, it's authentic from your own standpoint, yes. And
so you have to verify it.
Yeah, you try to verify it and you get into this realm of like, you're just spewing forth this array of impossible to verify assertions and giving this some type of label of a worldview, and that's just as outlandish and ridiculous as saying this flying spaghetti monster is controlling everything. And I think everybody falls into that bias or that potential bias trap. And I know I do. I know I have many times in my life. So this current time frame, this temporal part of my life is probably subject to those same influences. I can look back at my history, and hindsight is 20/20. I can look back through all my childhood, all the way up to my adulthood, and realize the majority of the stuff that I believed was wrong, the majority of stuff I thought was wrong, if I'm honest about it, right? And so what serves me, the precedence has been set that I probably just don't really know, right? So I should probably continue forward with that idea if I want to ever be reasonable. To go back to what Ben Rayfield was saying earlier about, how do you know? Like, how do you qualify that? Is I don't, but I can say based on what I think, the most correct information set that I have to my disposal leads me to these conclusions. And as long as I'm being rational and applying what I believe to be the best ethic I can to that subset of information, I think I'm doing the best I can with what I got, and I think that's the human condition. I think people are doing the best they can with what they have. Mm-hmm. I really strongly believe that. Ben?
So I wanted to pose the question. I'd like to hear some various voices and answers to her use of the word authentic. And I'm just curious if there's any agreement on what authentic philanthropy would be and what inauthentic philanthropy would be, and why would it matter?
Please, Art.
Well, I would say it's hard to interpret for sure. And I would say it's sort of like wondering if someone is talking behind your back. That's a part of inauthentic behavior. And also feeling that people are basically maybe a little more evil than you're inclined to. I've asked this one question before, there's this question that's been posed as to everything is nurture or nature. Then there's a third part to it. How much of it is choice? There's some philosophy that there is no choice, that everything is like, this is just really a complex expansion of physics, where if you could simulate the billiard table, we're just bouncing around doing our things.
Determinism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which I find humor in, because that's Calvinism in some ways. So there are these parallels, you could say, in some religious thinking or other origins of thought. I have wondered if you even have to determine it, and that's sort of what you're asking the question of, Ben, and then that is, does it really matter? Well, it does matter if you think you will be betrayed later on, but you can go your whole life anticipating that there are monsters outside, and you can stay locked in your house. And to that extent, it was true.
I'd go looking for them.
You are the monster.
That's it.
So Wendy, another answer to that prompt as well is that you might have heard me say, I believe this, you might not believe it or whatever, is that your expectations of others actually does influence their actions.
Yeah.
And so that if you do have this like broad, wide-standing idea that like people would speak negatively behind your back and all these type of things, the way that then that would come through in your body language would actually, I think, somewhat encourage people to actually do that if that was your expectations of them. Whereas conversely of that, if you never would expect that of anybody, I think that would then cause you to present yourself even in an unspoken way, carry yourself in a way that would actually make them less likely to do that behind your back. So I think that we do have some influence over, I think, our expectations and our ideas about others is constantly being put out there, whether it be in words or in body language, unspoken, communication. I think we're constantly putting out what we expect from society, and that does actually have an influence on then what comes back to us to some extent.
Yeah.
So, if you really do believe that people are doing the best they can with what they have, and you expect the best of people, I think those kind of mantras are really good, like small things to kind of guide, to be like a guiding light to some extent, because I think it's going to give you a better outlook in life. Just my own personal point of view. Steve?
Well, one problem with that is gullibility. If you think that someone is going to do right by you, to help you, to support you, and you buy into that, but that's not their true intent, and they wind up screwing you, right? That's not very helpful.
Okay, so
it needs to be realistic.
Fair enough. So I would say that the onus, then how we react to something like that, right? So if I trust somebody and they screw me over, so I can,
like Trump has done to so many men.
yeah. So I can fall back on, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I can fall back on that kind of thinking, right?
Yeah, and now no bank will do business with him.
Okay, sure. And
the Russians will, though.
Yeah, so there's this secondary and tertiary cascading effects and all this kind of stuff. But on the individual level, right? If I entrusted you and you did something to me and you harmed me, right, and you backstab me or whatever, right, then how I deal with that then becomes very crucial, right? Now I'll tell you how I deal with it. It might not be the right way. Maybe Bill can help with your background. But the way I would deal with that is I'd tell that person, hey, that was screwed up. You shouldn't have done that. I would even say, F you. Why would you do that? Why would you do that to me? And I would make them well aware that that was bullshit, that what they did to me. But I would stick the onus in my mind on that other person. I would say, I trusted them. I did my part. I did the right thing. I did the right thing to trust that person because we should trust each other. So I did the right thing. And then that person turned around and stabbed me in the back. That's their fault and it's their problem. And I'm not going to carry that burden with me personally. That's how I deal with it. I don't know if that's ideal or even healthy, but that's how I deal with it. Ben?
So you're saying you trust people even though there's a good chance they might backstab you?
Well, I didn't say that. No, I'm saying that without reason to, without a subset of information that you can really draw from, just in meeting somebody and the general impression of them is that they're just like everybody else. They're normal human beings, right? Is that by extending that trust, I'm doing my job as a fellow human being to give them the benefit of the doubt, and like I said, setting the expectation that they can be trusted, I think has an influence on how trustworthy somebody really is. I think what our expectations of other people do have a very strong shaping effect of their behaviors. I believe that. That belief might be incorrect, but I do believe that.
I think that by connecting ethics to trust, you're kind of price fixing on trust, and you're going to make people. You're going to give people the opportunity to take advantage of each other. You're going to have more backstabbing than ever because you artificially raise the trust.
Fair enough. So if I take two extremes then, point of view, take the two extremes, because I think that taking an extreme case a lot of times sheds lights on the normal case. So take the extreme case where you overextend trust to people way too much, and then you get burned left and right? Then take the opposite extreme where you don't trust anybody. Okay? Which one over the long period of time is going to serve you better in life? Right? I would argue the one where you extend trust on a regular basis will serve you much better in life than the one where you deny trust across the board systematically. Ben? And then I got to cue Mike. Benji?
Yeah,
I didn't know if you heard me.
I did. Trust, normal person, you extend a measure of trust. Having traveled internationally, I can assure you that one of the unique things about this country, and to some extent Western Europe, although I'm less experienced there, but this notion that other people are trustworthy on average, and that if you trust people, you will occasionally get screwed, but on average, you'll probably be just fine. You go leave your car with the keys, with the mechanic. He's probably going to fix your car and give you the car back. He's probably not going to steal your car, for example.
Right.
And the same with every other person that we trust our cars to.
But in that case, we have set up a system to do something bad to the mechanic if he does that to us. So there's not much trust involved.
It's true that we have a lot of systems to create this network of trust in this country, but it's somewhat unique to this country. And if you go to other countries, developing countries generally, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Eastern Europe, the default assumption is exactly the opposite. They assume that you're going to rip them off, and it's your job every which way to Sunday to prove that you're not. And there's a lot of effort and time wasted that goes into giving that extra assurance for every transaction. I mean, they won't give you money before they get your ice cream. Like, nobody gets anything ahead of time or for free. So it's not every person. It's not a normal person that trusts or a normal person that is worthy of trust. That's a uniquely American bias.
Okay, Michael?
If I take an action based on my expectation of the character of the person I'm interacting with and the probable results of my doing what I did and they doing what they are going to do, I think pretending that has anything at all to do with trust is absurd. That's figuring the odds. That's not trust. If I trust people because I want to trust people, not because they're likely or not likely to fulfill my expectations. Now, I don't do business much. I go to Walmart. That's about, as much business as I do. I have a bank that I trust, but it's my fourth bank, and I don't trust the other three. What?
They're called bank and trust.
Yeah, well, but I mean, it's my fourth one, and I don't trust the other three anymore. So, but that's an expectation based on past performance. So I don't think of it as trust. I know what they're going to do, and I don't much care for it. I like the way my current bank works, so I continue. But just today, my nephew came over to my house and wanted to use my Wi-Fi to accomplish some setup on his telephone. And this is this third time that he's wanted my Wi-Fi password. And he's next door to me. And he's my nephew, and I don't trust it because he's done it 3 times, and it's a pattern of behavior that indicates to me he's trying to get free Wi-Fi again, because that's what he was doing the other 2 times. So it's not about trust, it's recognizing a behavior and not wishing to participate. I actually probably wouldn't notice if he got on my Wi-Fi and watched his movies while I was watching my movies, because I got enough bandwidth for that. But I believe I'd be harming him by letting him think he had fooled me into letting him steal my Wi-Fi. And he's my nephew, so I owe him something. Has nothing to do with trust. Trust is when I do something and I don't consider whether or not it's likely that the outcome's going to be predictable. I just trust you. I'll do this. And if you don't do anything, or you do anything, positive or negative, or wonderful or terrible, well, that's the way life is. That's not what trust is. Trust is me making a decision without evidence.
Well, that's not trust if you are willing to accept both cases.
I disagree. I don't think it's trust unless you're willing to accept both cases.
No, trust is when you believe that somebody will do a certain thing.
No, that's betting the odds. That's not trust. Trust is when I do it, and I'm not worried about the outcome. I do it because I trust you. And you may or may not fulfill my expectations, although I didn't have any, so it's going to be pretty hard not to. But I don't care. Now, I realize this is an uncommon way to look at things. Yes, I know that. But I don't think, if I'm worried about the outcome, then I'm not trusting you. If the outcome matters more than you, then I'm certainly not being trusting. I'll just give it to you. And I don't care if it's logical or rational or reasonable. I just would rather trust people. And I think on the average, they're about average.
So I do this thing with my kids where I know they're lying to me. I know they're trying to manipulate me. I know they're trying to get to some situation, and I fully am aware of the truth, right? And I let them do it anyway. Like, I let them get away with it. And because it's like, I want them to push their boundaries in a non-hazardous way. You know what I mean? Like, so it's so minor to me that it's like, I want them to explore the outer boundaries of, you know what I mean, how to get what they want. And I don't want them to be deceptive people. That's not what I'm saying. I want them to have an environment where I'm not just going to come down on them like the hammer of God. You know what I mean? Like they did something wrong, and so now I'm just going to say, you lied to me, and, you know, I don't think that's the right answer. But I then think later on, in a subtle way, revealing that I did know that they, you know, becomes a kind of an elegant way to go about it. You know, because then
oh crap, he knows.
Yeah, he knew that whole time, and I think that is a non-punitive or non-harmful way to adjust behavior without causing damage. And that establishes even deeper trust. Because my kids know, even in the face of flat lying to me, I'm still going to be a loving, you know, dude, a loving guy in their lives. So maybe we should talk about rational child rearing, you know, in the near future, because there'd be some things there.
Yeah, I was going to say that those are not. There's more than just two alternatives.
Sure, always, right?
Yeah.
Actually, there's more than two choices. If there's only two, they're alternatives.
Okay.
That's what alternatives means.
But that situation that you're describing could be handled in a way perhaps even better than the two ways that you described.
Yeah, probably. And then I could then argue that there's probably way 3, way 4, way 5. You know, there's probably so many different alternatives.
No, there's choices.
Well, choices. There's so many choices that to pick the ideal one becomes so nebulous. You know, like I could exist in this world, and I've done this in my life before. When I was in college studying philosophy, I was like, you know, dang, you know, didn't even know which way to turn. Everywhere I turn, I'm doing something wrong, or I'm doing something right. It's like you can get locked in decision. You can get locked, like not be able to make a decision because trying to weigh the depths of every decision, no matter which way you go. it becomes so endless that you end up doing nothing, and then you have to understand that not making the choice was a choice, like Michael had said, and that you're then locking into whatever the default was, and so that's not necessarily good as well. So, kind of wrapping up here, but you know, I want to take just a second to something that always comes up in my mind on these goodness and evil discussions and all this kind of stuff, the goodness of people and whatnot, is that it's impossible, going back to that quote, right? It's like, you know, taking yourself out of humanity. How do you judge yourself, you know? It's kind of a cliche little thing, but in honesty now, in like literally zooming out, right? I'm looking at us as a group, okay? What is our actual collective net effect on this world? Like, what are we actually doing? Like, what is our, you know, I know what I'm doing for the most part.
Do you mean our group, or?
Yeah, just us right now. Take a snapshot of the people in this room, and I'm not going to cherry pick. I'm not making, you know, not spotting anybody here. I'm just saying in general. I'll make some loose assumptions here, right? I know we all drove here, and you know we have all these resources available to us, and we have this space, and we're consuming water and energy, and constantly, you know, if I look at the net footprint of my energy that I use every day, it's substantial. You know, because I live in a metropolitan area, it's not a dense city, there's not mass transit, I use a lot of resources, right? And then, so is there some type of measurement, if I really want to consider myself a good person, is there some type of empirical then qualifier or an increased demand on me as an individual to do more because of the amount that resources that I'm commanding? Like, so every given day, you can get the statistics on it. You can find out how much like stone, you know, you per capita uses by being a resident in Charlotte, North Carolina. You can find how much gas, how much energy. You can look at your electrical bills.
But you paid for it. What's the big deal?
Because it's a finite, fleeting resource. It's a temporal thing. It's bankrupting the future. You know, there's all these things. I can get into this complexity in my mind where I can say, you know, the net effect of what I'm doing just by doing my normal daily affairs could be considered a net negative. You know, so all of us trying to be good people, I know for a fact that everyone in this room is on a personal quest to try to be a good person. I know that just from knowing you guys all as individuals, but, well, I don't know you.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You might be the exception. But, you know, Bill dedicates, not to cherry pick Bill, call Bill out, but, you know, Bill spent a substantial amount of his own personal time trying to create a life philosophy that can benefit people, you know, and that's, you know, there's no paycheck involved with it. There's no prestige. He's not a king on a throne or anything, you know, he's just doing it. And so,
Bill's changing the world.
well, I mean,
It actually has a negative effect. People look down upon that sort of thing.
and so that's something then that maybe a minority
That's the beginning.
could persevere and create
mean you're not
that
changing.
counterpoint that maybe we were talking about earlier. But what I'm trying to say is, like, if we really zoom out and just look at the collective effect of what we're doing, how much energy are we using, how much resources are we using, is there then some type of culpability or responsibility that we then have to society? Because if society, if the world, if you will, is going to put that much resource towards me as an individual, is then the onus on me to do something great? I don't know. It's just something that I contemplate and want to throw it out to you guys, and maybe think of, like, you know, this structure that we're in is one that is very rewarding. We have discretionary time, we have free time, we have, you know, enough resources to where our food, shelter, water, you know, all that stuff is taken care of for the most part. We have this discretionary time that we can use to then do what we want to do with that time. And so it's kind of like, with increased responsibility becomes increased, you know, that kind of saying. With great power becomes great responsibility. With great power becomes, you know, becomes, yeah, great responsibility.
Why does it have to be debt to society? Why can't you just, if you can do something great, then why wouldn't you want to?
Well, that's the kind of the nature of this whole discussion tonight, is to bring it back, like, to the full circle. Is that I think that people do that with their advantageous positions. I think that we can count on people doing that in part or in whole. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of end with that. So there's 3 things that we wanted to accomplish this year. We had a trifecta of things, and we did 2 of them so far. One was to raise food for the Second Harvest food drive. We've been doing that. We've raised over half a ton of food for the Second Harvest. This group has. The second thing was we did a community cleanup. We own Tuckasegee Road from Mulberry Church Road all the way down to Queen City Road. We own that. Our signs are up now for Nova.Social. They're up, like physical signs that the city put them up. Michael participated in that event. That was a success. And the third thing is we're going to do something in an old folks home. We're going to do something for the aged community, right? And so
Come to my house.
come visit you. So what we're going to be doing this year is we're going to be doing caroling at 2 aged care facilities.
Caroling?
We're going to be doing non-secular caroling.
Okay.
Right? So we'll be singing 3 songs back to back in 2 separate facilities. And so,
Imagine.
yeah, imagine. You know,
That's
so
the song you're gonna sing.
No, we could. So
That's not a Christmas
we're gonna be caroling. This is coming up in about a week and a half. It's going to be not connected with this, but it's just another
And a Hanukkah song.
event. So if you're interested in that, I'm just going to close with if you're interested in that, let me know and I'll get you signed up. So there'll be 3 songs and we'll select them. I can have up to 10 people. I think makes sense. I already have 4 people, so I can take 6 more. So
I'll sing.
You'll sing?
Did you say when?
It's coming up. I don't have the exact
okay.
dates because I have to coordinate it with the
Okay.
homes, but it'll be like a evening thing.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. Tiffany will come sing.
I've just got the end of that to say that you're going caroling. Can I say that, most old people lose their hearing or lose their hearing efficiency. So it doesn't matter if you can sing. Please come and do it. If I could be there, I would love to do it. And if I could actually be there on the phone, I would be singing as well.
So, Steve, you said you'll do it?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So there's that.
Wendy's
and
gonna
then,
do it.
yeah,
You'll do it, Wendy?
I'm interested in it if I
fantastic.
can arrange it. Yeah.
Wendy can play the guitar.
Anybody else in this group want to do 3 songs, Carolyn? No?
Do you know what the songs are?
No, we're going to pick them. We're going to pick the 3 songs, but they're going to be traditional, Christmas songs, non-secular though. Like it's not going to be.
Secular, not non-secular.
I mean, non-God related.
Non-secular.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
You what?
Yes, they're going to be non-religious songs because of sensitivities, not amongst our group, but in general.
Right.
So okay, so that's already, we have like 3 slots left. So all right, well I'll be soliciting you later anyway on the email or whatever. So don't be surprised. Great. So that's it. That's today's topic. Hope you enjoyed. And I kind of do have a bias towards Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer.
Wonderful song.
But we'll see how that goes. I've always loved that song, so I figured why not throw that one in, and they would enjoy it as well. I know they would enjoy it. So great. So that'll round out our three initiatives for this year that we wanted to accomplish. So it'll be fun. And I may or may not get a video of it. We'll see. Depends if Megan is available that night. Cool. Well, thanks everybody. And food looks like it's quite abundant, so help yourself. And so sometimes people stay for a few minutes and chit chat, so it's not like
Sometimes a couple hours.
Get out of here. No.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Well, thank
I
you.
have something to show everybody. It's not a group thing, but
Did you know your name is now Benji?